I'm writing this with my phone on silent and my bedroom door locked because my brother, my hero, has turned our whole family into a cover story. 3 nights ago, my screen lit up and I saw a text preview I wasn't supposed to see. Hey babe, can't wait to see you tonight. Missing you so much. The name was Amanda. And the worst part wasn't the message itself. The worst part was how quickly my brain connected all the little moments that didn't make sense, like Lindsay smiling at me over popcorn and saying she was so glad my brother and I had gone to the movies together, when we hadn't. My brother, Derek, 25, has been telling his fiancée Lindsay he's with me when he's not. He's been using me as his alibi so smoothly that even I started doubting my memory at first, like maybe I'd forgotten a night we'd hung out. But I didn't forget. Because some nights I was at home in sweatpants doing homework while he was out helping me, and Lindsay was thanking him for being such a great big brother. Like I was a prop, like my name was just something he could slide into a sentence to make a lie sound wholesome. And Lindsay, she's not just his fiancée. She's the closest thing I've had to an older sister. She takes me out for girl time. She asks my opinion on wedding stuff like it actually matters. She makes my mom laugh again, the way she used to before my dad's cheating snapped our family in half. My dad left when I was 7. He cheated over and over, and Derek hated him for it. Derek swore he'd never become that kind of man. So when I finally confronted Derek about Amanda, I expected excuses, panic, maybe even tears. What I didn't expect was the look on his face. Like I had walked in on something sacred, like I was the problem for noticing. He called it not serious. He said it was just physical. He said he panicked after getting engaged and needed to explore options. Then he begged me to keep quiet, because if Lindsay finds out, the wedding dies. And if the wedding dies, our whole perfect family picture dies with it. So now I'm sitting here with the truth burning a hole in my chest, and one question I can't escape. Do I protect my brother, or do I protect the woman he's about to marry? My name is Haley Morgan, and I'm 16 years old. That's the first thing I need you to understand. Because every time Derek tells me I'm too young to get involved, it lands like a slap. Like morality is something you age into. Like right and wrong are locked behind a door you can't open until you're old enough to rent a car. But the truth is, I grew up learning what cheating does to a family. I didn't learn it from a lecture. I learned it from the way my mom's face changed the day she stopped believing in forever. My dad wasn't just not around much. He was present in the worst possible way, showing up for birthdays with gifts and guilt, then disappearing again into someone else's life. He cheated on my mom multiple times. She tried to forgive him at least twice. Like forgiveness was duct tape, something you could wrap around a cracked marriage and pretend it was solid again. The last affair was the one that blew everything apart. It was so cliché it felt unreal. His secretary. Mom found out because she did something sweet. She packed him lunch. She drove to his office to surprise him, probably imagining a kiss on the cheek and that warm feeling of being a wife who still mattered. Instead, she walked into his office and saw them kissing. I was 7, so I didn't see that part. But I saw the aftermath. I saw my mom come home with her hands shaking, the lunch bag still in her grip like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I remember her standing in the kitchen, staring at the counter like she didn't know what to do next. And then she slid down the cabinets and cried so hard she sounded like she couldn't breathe. That sound, it stays with you. Derek was 16 then, old enough to understand exactly what it meant. And Derek didn't just get angry, he transformed. Overnight, he became the wall between me and everything that could hurt. He stopped talking to Dad for 3 years. He told Mom she didn't deserve that kind of love. He would mutter things under his breath like, cheaters are the worst kind of people, like he was making a promise to the universe. And in a weird way, Derek became the man of the house before he was even a man. He taught me how to ride a bike, jogging behind me with one hand on the seat, yelling, I've got you, don't look down. He helped me with homework when Mom was too exhausted to function. Once, when a boy at school kept messing with me, Derek showed up at pickup and stared the kid down so intensely the kid actually backed away. For years, Derek was my safety. That's why what I'm about to tell you feels like trying to accept that gravity has reversed. Because 8 months ago, Derek proposed to Lindsay Carter, and it was the happiest I'd seen our family in a long time. They'd been together 4 years. Lindsay is the kind of woman who makes you feel included without making you feel small. She's kind, funny, and she treats me like a little sister, not like an annoying attachment to her fiancé. She started calling our hangouts girl time. Nails, baking, shopping. I'm not even into super girly stuff, but with her, it didn't feel fake. It felt warm, easy, like a version of family I didn't realize I was still craving. And Mom adored her. Lindsay and Mom would go to lunch without me sometimes, just the two of them. They talked about wedding plans and life and, I don't know, healing. Because Mom smiled more when Lindsay was around. Like having her in our orbit reminded Mom that not every relationship ends in betrayal. The wedding was planned for next May, about 9 months away. Lindsay had picked a dress. She asked me to be a bridesmaid. She showed me flower samples and asked what color I liked, like my opinion mattered. And Derek looked proud, steady, like he'd finally built something better than the mess our father left behind. So when the lies started, they didn't feel like lies at first. They felt like confusion, a harmless mistake. The first time Lindsay casually said, "I'm glad you and Derek had fun at the movies the other night," I actually froze with a smile on my face, my brain scrambling. Because Derek hadn't been with me. He'd told Lindsay he was. And I didn't realize in that exact moment my brother had already pulled me into something I never agreed to be part of. After that first comment from Lindsay, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. People mix things up. Dates blur. Memories overlap. That's what I wanted to believe, because the alternative meant accepting something darker about my brother, and I wasn't ready for that yet. But then it happened again. And again. Little comments slipped into conversation like they belonged there. Lindsay would smile at me and say things like, "Thanks again for letting Derek vent to you the other night," or, "You're such a good sister. He always feels better after hanging out with you." Every time my stomach tightened, because I hadn't seen him. Not once on those nights. The lies weren't dramatic. They were casual, comfortable, like Derek had practiced them enough that they no longer felt like lies at all. I finally asked him about it one evening when he stopped by our place. Mom was out, and we were sprawled on the couch watching something dumb on TV. I tried to keep my tone light, like I wasn't already bracing myself. "Hey," I said, not looking at him. "Why does Lindsay think we hang out all the time?" Derek went still. Not shocked, not confused. Just still. Then he glanced at me and gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just go with it, okay?" I frowned. "Go with what?" "It's nothing bad," he said quickly. "Just don't make it weird." That should have been the moment I pushed harder. But this is the thing about people you love, especially people who raised you in the emotional sense. You want to trust them? You want to believe there's a good reason you just don't see yet. I told myself maybe he was planning a surprise for Lindsay. Maybe it was something romantic. Maybe he needed an alibi for something good. But weeks passed. No surprise. No explanation. Just more lies with my name stitched into them. Every time Derek used me as his cover, I felt smaller. Like my role in the family had quietly shifted from little sister to useful excuse. And then came Thursday night. Derek came over to hang out. Mom was working late, and it was just the two of us. We ordered pizza, picked a movie, and for the first time in weeks, things felt normal, familiar. About an hour in, Derek stood up and grabbed his jacket. "I'm going to run out and grab some Chinese food," he said. "I'm still hungry." He left his phone on the coffee table. I wasn't snooping, I swear that matters to me. But his phone lit up. Bright. Obvious. Impossible to miss. I didn't even see the whole message. Just the preview. "Hey babe, can't wait to see you tonight. Missing you so much." From Amanda. My heart started pounding so hard, I thought I might actually throw up. I stared at the screen like it might change if I waited long enough. Like the name would morph into something harmless. Like Amanda would somehow turn into Lindsay. But it didn't. When Derek came back with the food, I asked him quietly, "Who's Amanda?" He froze. This time, there was no pretending. No casual shrug. No smooth explanation. He looked like he'd just been caught mid-fall, realizing there was no ground beneath him. At first, he said she was just a friend from work. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I just waited. And something about the silence broke him. He sat down, rubbed his face with both hands, and finally said it. He'd been seeing Amanda for about a month. Right around the time he started using me as his alibi. She worked at his office. They'd connected during a company happy hour. He swore it was just physical. He said he still loved Lindsay. Then came the sentence that changed how I looked at him forever. "I just panicked," he said. "Getting engaged made everything feel so final." I thought of my dad. I thought of my mom crying on the kitchen floor. I thought of all the times Derek told me cheaters were the worst kind of people. And I realized the conflict wasn't coming. It was already here. The room felt too small after he said it. I panicked. The words just hung there between us, thin and useless, like they were supposed to explain everything. Like fear of commitment somehow softened betrayal. I stared at Derek, waiting for him to say more, waiting for him to look ashamed, waiting for him to sound like the brother who once swore he'd never become our father. Instead, he kept talking. He said Amanda did not mean anything. He said it was just sex. He said he needed to figure things out before the wedding. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he said, I didn't want Lindsay to worry. That's why I used you. Used. Not asked, not told, used. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and kept pulling. I tried to breathe slowly so I wouldn't cry, because crying felt like giving him something he didn't deserve in that moment. You lied to her, I said quietly, with my name. Derek sighed, already frustrated. Haley, relax. It's temporary. I'm ending it. When? Soon. That word again. Vague, empty, convenient. I asked him if Lindsay knew anything, if she'd noticed changes, if she'd asked questions. He shook his head and said she trusted him completely. That hurt more than anything else, because she trusted him the way my mom once trusted my dad. And I was standing there, knowing exactly how that story ended. I told Derek he had to tell her. His expression changed instantly. Not fear, anger. He stood up and started pacing the living room, running a hand through his hair like I was the problem now. You don't get it, he snapped. If you tell her, it'll destroy everything. You already destroyed it, I said. He stopped pacing and looked at me sharply. You're 16. You don't understand adult relationships. That sentence cut deeper than he realized, because I did understand what betrayal does. I understood it in the way kids understand storms, by watching the wreckage afterward. He came closer and lowered his voice. Please, just give me time. I'll end it, I swear. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to grab his phone and throw it against the wall. I wanted to call Lindsay right then and put the truth on speaker. But instead, I hesitated. Because he was my brother. Because he raised me when our dad walked away. Because some part of me still believed he'd do the right thing if I gave him the chance. So I told him I'd wait. 1 week. No more lies, no more using me. He hugged me after that, like that made it better, and promised it would stop. I didn't hug him back. The week that followed was torture. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. I kept expecting a message from Derek saying he'd told her, or from Lindsay asking if everything was okay. Neither came. Instead, 2 days before the deadline, Mom, Lindsay, and I went to see a movie together. We were standing in the lobby afterward when Lindsay laughed and said, It was so sweet of Derek to help you with your math homework last night. I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't seen Derek all day. I smiled anyway. I nodded. I hated myself for it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Derek's promises, comparing them to his actions. He hadn't ended anything. He hadn't stopped lying. He'd just gotten better at it. The deadline came and went. I texted him, Did you tell her? He read the message. He didn't respond. That was the moment everything inside me snapped into focus, because silence is an answer. I checked my phone again and saw a message from Lindsay asking if Derek was stopping by our place later. She said he'd told her he was coming to see me. Another lie. I sat on my bed staring at the wall, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I thought about Lindsay and her wedding dress. About Mom finally believing our family could have something good again. About Derek asking me to be loyal while he betrayed everyone else. I stood up, grabbed my bike, and walked out the door. The ride to Derek and Lindsay's apartment felt endless. My legs burned, my hands shook on the handlebars, and I kept thinking I should turn around. But then I imagined standing next to Lindsay at her wedding, knowing what I knew. And I realized the inciting moment wasn't Derek's affair. It was the moment I decided I wasn't going to help him hide it. By the time I reached their apartment, my legs were shaking. Not from the bike ride, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I stood outside the building for a full minute, staring at the glass door like it might talk me out of it. My reflection looked pale, younger than 16 somehow, like a kid pretending to be brave. I almost texted Derek again, almost gave him one last chance. But then I thought about how many chances he'd already taken without telling me. I buzzed Lindsay's apartment. She answered almost immediately, her voice bright and unsuspecting. Haley? When she opened the door, she looked genuinely surprised. She smiled and asked if I was looking for Derek. That question, so casual, so trusting, nearly broke me. I swallowed and said, Can I talk to you for a minute, alone? The smile faded just enough for concern to flicker across her face. She stepped aside and let me in. The apartment smelled like laundry detergent and candles. Wedding magazines were stacked on the coffee table. There was a half-filled notebook with color swatches tucked into it. Flower ideas, I guessed. We sat down across from each other, and my hands started shaking so badly I had to tuck them under my thighs. I'm really sorry, I said. I should have come to you sooner. She frowned, confused but still calm. Haley, what's going on? I took a breath and forced the words out before I could change my mind. I told her about Amanda. I told her Derek had been seeing her for about a month. I told her he'd been using me as his alibi. I told her I'd confronted him and given him time to tell her himself. For a second, Lindsay just stared at me. Then she laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded impossible. No, she said lightly. There must be some kind of misunderstanding. I didn't argue. I just looked at her. Something in my face must have shifted because her laugh died mid-breath. Her shoulders stiffened. She picked up her phone and called Derek. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Her hands started to tremble, mirroring mine. Who is she? Lindsay asked quietly. I told her Amanda worked at Derek's office. Lindsay stared at her phone for a long moment, then scrolled through her contacts and dialed another number. She put it on speaker. Amanda, she said when the call connected, her voice tight. Are you sleeping with my fiancé? There was a pause. Then Amanda laughed nervously and said Lindsay was being dramatic. Lindsay didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just kept asking questions. Calm, precise, like she needed the facts to stay upright. Finally, Amanda snapped. She admitted it. About a month. She said Derek told her things were complicated. She blamed Lindsay for not being exciting enough. Then she hung up. Lindsay stared at the blank screen, her breath shallow and uneven, and then she broke. She folded in on herself, covering her face with both hands, sobbing in a way that felt ripped straight out of her chest. I slid closer and wrapped my arms around her, even though I didn't know if it was okay. She clung to me like I was the only solid thing in the room. I don't understand, she whispered. I didn't see this coming. Neither had I. We cried together until her mom arrived to pick her up. Lindsay packed a bag with shaking hands. Before she left, she hugged me tightly and said, Thank you for telling me. I know that couldn't have been easy. She was right, but the hardest part hadn't come yet. When I got home, Mom was in the kitchen making dinner like it was a normal night. I stood there watching her for a second, this woman who had survived so much already, and then I fell apart. I told her everything. She went very quiet, then very angry. She tried calling Derek immediately. He didn't answer her either. The next day, Derek finally texted me. He called me a traitor. He said I'd ruined his life. I didn't respond. Because for the first time since all this started, I wasn't questioning whether I'd done the right thing. I just felt empty. The silence after everything came out was almost worse than the confrontation itself. Derek didn't speak to me. He didn't come by the house. He didn't answer Mom's calls. It was like he had vanished, except he hadn't. I could feel him hovering at the edges of everything, his absence loud and heavy, like a door left open during a storm. Lindsay texted me the next morning. She said she and Derek were officially over. She told me she might have tried to work through it if he'd come clean on his own, but the fact that he lied, used me, and let a 16-year-old carry the truth for him was something she couldn't forgive. Reading that made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. Not guilt exactly, more like grief for something that should have been good. Mom took the news hard, but not in the way I thought she would. She wasn't devastated. She was furious. This is exactly how it starts, she said, pacing the kitchen. Exactly. The lies, the excuses, the panic. I raised him better than this. She left 3 voicemails for Derek that day. In the last one, her voice was steady but cold. She told him he was welcome to come talk when he was ready to take responsibility, but not before. That night, Derek finally texted me again. A long message, paragraphs. He said Lindsay had broken up with him. He said she'd thrown him out of the apartment. He said the wedding was off and everyone was blaming him. And then came the part that hurt the most. He said none of this would have happened if I'd stayed out of it. I stared at my phone until the screen went dark. For years, Derek had been the person who told me to speak up, to stand up for myself, to do the right thing even when it was hard. And now he was punishing me for doing exactly that. The escalation didn't stop there. 3 days later, Derek showed up at our house around midnight. I woke up to the doorbell ringing again and again and again, sharp and frantic. Mom got to the door before I did. I stood at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding, listening. Derek was drunk. I could hear it in his voice. Slurred, loud, angry. He kept saying he needed to talk to me, that I didn't understand, that I'd ruined everything over something that wasn't even real. Mom refused to let him in. When he tried to push past her, she threatened to call the police. That stopped him. He stumbled backward, cursed under his breath, and left. The next morning, he called Mom and apologized for showing up drunk. He asked if he could come back later, sober, to talk. Mom agreed, but set clear rules. Respectful, honest, no yelling. When he came back that evening, I stayed in my room. I didn't want to see him. I didn't trust myself not to cry or scream. I could hear them talking downstairs. Their voices rose and fell, sometimes sharp, sometimes quiet. I heard Mom mention Dad's name more than once. That alone told me everything. After about an hour, Mom knocked on my door. "He wants to talk to you," she said gently, "but it's your choice." I sat there for a long time, staring at my hands. Then I went downstairs. Derek looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally. His eyes were red, his shoulders slumped. He didn't look like the confident man who'd been planning a wedding. He looked like someone who had finally realized the consequences were real. For the first time, he didn't make excuses. He admitted what he'd done was wrong. He admitted using me as an alibi was unforgivable. He said he'd ended things with Amanda after Lindsay left, but by then, it didn't matter. He apologized to me, not the quick, dismissive kind, a real one. I listened, but I didn't rush to forgive him. I told him I needed time, space. That trust doesn't snap back into place just because someone says the right words. He nodded. He didn't argue. That was new. After he left, Mom sat with me on the couch and told me something I didn't expect. She said watching Derek make the same mistakes as Dad forced her to confront how deep the damage really went. How trauma doesn't disappear just because you swear you'll be different. People don't repeat patterns because they want to, she said quietly. They repeat them because they never healed. That didn't excuse Derek, but it explained something. And still, things were far from over. Because while Derek was spiraling, Lindsay was rebuilding. And watching her move forward without him was going to change everything. I thought the hardest part would be telling Lindsay the truth. I was wrong. The hardest part came afterward, when everything went quiet and there was nothing left to do except sit with what had been broken. For weeks, our house felt different, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Derek stopped coming by. When he did text, it was brief and careful, like he was afraid to say the wrong thing and lose what little connection we still had. I didn't respond much, not because I was trying to punish him, but because I didn't know who he was to me anymore. My brother, my hero, or just a man who made the same choices as our father. That question followed me everywhere. Lindsay moved in with her parents temporarily. The apartment she and Derek had shared, once filled with wedding plans and laughter, was now just another place she needed to escape from. She texted me occasionally, mostly to check in or say thank you again for telling her the truth. Every time my phone buzzed with her name, I felt a twist of sadness and relief all at once. Sadness for what she lost. Relief that she didn't marry into a lie. Mom tried to hold everything together like she always had. She went to work, cooked dinner, asked me about school, but sometimes I'd catch her staring at nothing, her face tired in a way I hadn't seen since Dad left. One night, I heard her crying softly in her room. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet grief. That sound, the same one from years ago, came back to me in full force, and in that moment, the guilt hit me hard. If I hadn't said anything, if I'd just stayed quiet, if I'd protected Derek instead of the truth, Mom wouldn't be hurting like this. Derek wouldn't be spiraling. Our family wouldn't feel so fractured. I lay awake replaying everything, wondering if there was a version of this where less damage happened, a version where Derek came clean on his own, a version where I wasn't the one who set everything on fire. But deep down, I knew the truth. I hadn't created the fire. I'd just stopped pretending it wasn't there. Still, knowing that didn't make the loneliness easier. At school, everything felt unreal. People complained about homework and weekend plans, and I wanted to scream that none of it mattered. That families fall apart quietly while the world keeps spinning. I didn't tell my friends what was going on. Derek and Lindsay were part of our shared social circle, and I didn't want to be the reason gossip spread. So I carried it alone. One afternoon, I came home to find Mom sitting at the kitchen table with Derek's engagement announcement card in her hands, the one Lindsay had mailed out months ago. Mom hadn't thrown it away yet. She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "I really thought this was going to be different," she said. So did I. That night was the lowest point, because it wasn't about Derek's cheating anymore. It was about the realization that people you love can hurt others in ways you never imagined, and that loving them doesn't mean protecting them from consequences. I went to bed feeling older than I'd ever felt in my life, not wiser, just heavier. But sometimes hitting that emotional bottom is what forces clarity. Because as painful as it was to see everything fall apart, I started to notice something else quietly happening in the background. Lindsay was surviving. She wasn't destroyed. She wasn't begging Derek to fix things. She was moving forward, slowly, shakily, but on her own terms. And seeing that planted a thought I hadn't allowed myself to consider yet. Maybe telling the truth didn't ruin everything. Maybe it saved someone. The turning point didn't arrive with a dramatic confrontation or a perfectly timed apology. It arrived quietly, through observation, through distance, through watching what happened when the truth was no longer negotiable. About 3 weeks after everything fell apart, Lindsay asked me to meet her for coffee. I hesitated before saying yes, worried that seeing her might reopen wounds that were only just starting to scab over. But when I walked into the cafe and saw her sitting by the window, something surprised me. She looked lighter. Not happy, not healed, but steadier. Her hair was pulled back loosely, her shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. She smiled when she saw me, really smiled, and that alone felt like permission to breathe again. We talked about small things at first. School, work, the weather, normal conversation, like the world hadn't cracked open a month earlier. Then she told me she'd found a small apartment not far from her parents' place. Nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, lots of light. "I'm using the ring money for the deposit," she said calmly. I blinked. "The ring?" She nodded. "I took it back to the jeweler. They gave me most of the value in store credit. I decided to put it toward a place that's actually mine." There was no bitterness in her voice. Just resolve. She told me Derek had tried to reach out again, promising counseling, transparency, anything she wanted, but it wasn't enough. "I could have forgiven the affair," she admitted quietly. "I really think I could have. But I can't forgive being lied to so thoroughly, or watching him put you in the middle to protect himself." That sentence landed hard, because for the first time I saw myself not as the catalyst of destruction, but as the line Derek had crossed, without hesitation. Lindsay reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she said, "even when it cost you." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but firmly. I went home that day and looked at Derek's last message again, the one where he'd called me a traitor. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to apologize. I realized something crucial. If telling the truth makes someone lose everything, then maybe what they had was already built on lies. A few days later, Derek texted again. This time he didn't accuse me. He asked if we could talk. I didn't say yes right away. I sat with the request and asked myself what I needed, not what he wanted, not what would keep the peace, not what would make Mom feel better. When I finally agreed, I told him it would be on my terms. We met in a park near our house, public, neutral, safe. Derek looked tired, thinner, like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. He told me he'd started counseling. He said the word carefully, like it mattered. He admitted, out loud, that he'd become someone he didn't recognize, that he'd convinced himself he was different from Dad while making the same choices. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I just want you to know I'm trying to understand why I did this." I listened, but I didn't rush to comfort him. Instead, I told him something I'd been holding in for weeks. I told him how it felt to be used as an alibi, how it made me question my place in his life, how it felt to be asked for loyalty while being lied through. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He just nodded and said, "I'm sorry." That was the turning point. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally understood something clearly. I could love my brother and hold him accountable. Those two things were not opposites. And I didn't have to sacrifice my integrity to keep someone else comfortable. For the first time since all this began, I felt grounded. Not in the chaos, but in myself. The fallout didn't explode. It unraveled. Slowly, publicly, inevitably. Once the wedding was officially canceled, the story spread the way these things always do. Not with full truths, but with fragments. Questions. Whispers. People choosing sides without ever asking Lindsay what actually happened. At first, Derek tried to control the narrative. He told some people it was mutual. He told others Lindsay was confused and overreacting. He never mentioned Amanda. He never mentioned me. But lies don't age well, especially when the truth has already been spoken once and remembered clearly by the person it hurt most. Lindsay didn't go out of her way to expose him. She didn't post anything dramatic. She didn't send mass texts. She simply told the truth when asked. And the truth did what it always does when it's allowed to stand on its own. It started with Amanda. Within weeks, word got around their shared social circle that Amanda hadn't just slept with an engaged man. She'd slept with the fiancé of one of her friends, someone she'd met at a birthday party, someone who had trusted her. Amanda transferred to a different branch at work shortly after. Officially, it was for professional growth. Unofficially, it was because the tension had become unbearable. Then came Derek's friends. Some distanced themselves quietly. Some confronted him outright. A few told him they'd been cheated on before and couldn't excuse what he'd done. For the first time in his adult life, Derek couldn't charm his way out of the consequences. At home, the impact was heavier. Mom didn't yell anymore. She didn't lecture. She did something worse, something far more uncomfortable for Derek. She stopped rescuing him. When he complained about losing friends, she reminded him that trust isn't something you get to demand back. When he said Lindsay should have fought harder, Mom shut that down immediately. She fought by leaving, Mom said once, her voice steady. That's what self-respect looks like. That sentence sat in the house like a verdict. Derek moved into a smaller apartment. Counseling became a regular part of his life, not a talking point, but a routine. He stopped drinking for a while. He lost weight. He stopped pretending everything was fine. And I watched all of it from a careful distance. We started talking again, but differently. No inside jokes, no automatic trust, no pretending the past hadn't happened. Our conversations were slower now, thoughtful, sometimes awkward, sometimes honest in a way we'd never been before. I didn't rush to be close again, and he didn't push. Lindsay, meanwhile, kept moving forward. She settled into her new apartment. She sent me a picture of her first night there, pizza on the floor, unpacked boxes everywhere, and a caption that said, "Not how I imagined this year going, but I feel okay." That word okay meant everything. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't need to. Life did the correcting on its own. The wedding vendors refunded what they could. The guest list faded back into normal life. The engagement ring became a down payment instead of a promise. And slowly, the version of Derek that existed as the guy who cheated replaced the version that existed as the perfect fiancé. Not in cruelty, in reality. One evening, months later, Derek admitted something to me while we were walking. He said losing Lindsay hurt, but losing my trust terrified him. That was the moment I knew the lesson had landed. Because consequences don't exist to destroy people. They exist to teach them who they really are when comfort is removed. I didn't forgive him fully that night, but I saw him clearly. And for the first time since all this began, I wasn't carrying his guilt anymore. It was his to hold. It's been 6 months now. Not everything is fixed. Not everything is forgiven. But everything is honest. Derek and I talk again. Carefully, intentionally. We get coffee sometimes. We go on walks. We avoid pretending the past didn't happen. Trust, I've learned, doesn't come back in grand gestures. It comes back in consistency, in showing up without excuses, in listening without defending. Derek is still in counseling. He told me it's forcing him to confront things he buried for years. His anger at Dad, his fear of becoming him, and the irony of how running from that fear led him straight into the same behavior. He doesn't say he's better now. He says he's aware. That feels more real. Mom surprised me the most. She forgave Derek, but she didn't minimize what he did. She didn't rush him back into the role of good son. She let him earn his way back into trust, the same way she once had to rebuild herself after Dad left. Watching her do that taught me something powerful. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let bitterness decide who you become. Lindsay is doing well. She moved fully into her apartment. She started dating again. Not seriously, just carefully. She looks happier than she did in the months before the wedding, and that still stops me in my tracks sometimes. We don't talk every day anymore. Life moved us into different rhythms, but when we do talk, there's no tension, no resentment, just mutual respect. She once told me, "You didn't ruin my life. You gave it back to me." I carry that with me. As for me, I grew up. Not all at once, not by choice, but by learning that loyalty without integrity is just silence dressed up as love. I learned that protecting someone doesn't mean hiding their wrongdoing. I learned that doing the right thing can cost you, but it costs others more when you don't. And I learned that being brave doesn't feel strong in the moment. It feels terrifying. Derek was my hero once. Now he's just human. And strangely, that's okay. Because heroes don't teach you much about real life. But flawed people who face consequences and try to change do. If you're ever standing where I stood, holding a truth that could shatter someone else's illusion, here's what I've learned. Truth doesn't destroy healthy relationships. It only exposes the ones already breaking. And choosing honesty, especially when it's hard, is never betrayal. It's courage.